And welcome to revisions. We are starting these in session 2, but they will happen across the course, and they are just helpful to think about and to explore no matter what course you're doing, as long as it has writing and you are getting feedback. Part of what we'll explore here is sort of a general approach to revising, but I will also include elements about how I revise. And so it's a great idea to take that idea and ask an instructor, well, what are some tips about how they approach writing and responding to your work, so that you feel able and connected. So in English 103, we have 3 revisions. We, of course, have our session 1 5-paragraph paper, which we tackle in session 2. In session 3, we have our literary analysis paper that we revise in session 4. Finally, in session 4, we have our academic paper, and we will revise that in session 5. So every week looks a little busy. There's a lot to get done, right? But we are not just writing these, but we're revising them so that you can feel really confident when you go forward, rather than just trying to take that feedback and think, well, what would I do with this? Instead, we're going to utilize it and seek to grow. There are a lot of different possibilities, which we'll get to as well, in that maybe there's a lot to revise, maybe there's a little to revise, and it just really depends on too many factors to count. So what is it? What are we doing this for, and why? Why is it so important, and why do we keep doing it? Well, part of the reading in session 2 covers that, and it's a good place to start. And we are looking at the feedback our instructor gives us and asking, well, how can I apply this to future papers? How can I clarify myself? And it's a great time to also ask your instructor for any clarification regarding their comments. Like, this feedback makes sense, but what exactly do you want me to do with it? Or I applied the feedback, but did I do it correctly? There are lots of different ways to approach these, and we're going to look at some samples. And of course, you're always welcome to add more comments in the submission text box. So what's happening with it? What is your instructor doing with the feedback? Well, part of it is grading criteria. I'm looking at what the assignment wants, which you have access to as well, and I'm saying, does it fit that? That can be content and it can be form. So it could be about having a thesis, or it could be about coming up with really new and innovative ideas. And of course, we're always looking at the basics, what is happening with grammar, punctuation, and APA. You'll notice that these numbers for these elements tend to be smaller because thankfully people aren't just that into ruining your grade for a couple of errors there. So bigger elements like having a thesis or having an introduction or having the correct number of paragraphs and items like that are going to be about more points than, oh, you missed some commas. Grading criteria vary by assignment. They're usually going to include content and APA, but you can always pre-grade it by exploring these criteria yourself. It's a great way to explore the ideas and give yourself a baseline for a discussion with your instructor. Then you can say, well, why did you feel X was the correct grade and your instructor chose Y? Why are there differences there? So it's always a good plan to explore them, and I love the questions I get from these because it really helps me process sort of what I'm doing, and it helps me make sure I'm staying as close to this as possible. The whole aim of having grading criteria is that across the board, across all these colleges and universities, you have similar courses. And if you're going to go from one school to the next, we need to be able to say, well, if you've done X course, you should know X material. And so things like grading criteria are very much about helping me, no matter where I am, get each student to reach the same space of understanding and processing that material. So let's look at some ideas. Consider targeting your reading with small steps. Don't look for everything at once. Don't read for everything at once. Start with smaller basics. Ask yourself, what is the thesis? Does it make sense? Underline that. Anything you're reading, underline the thesis. See what other people are doing as well. Now, look at every paragraph. Does it have one point that you could sum up in 10 words or less, like a fortune cookie? Could you sum that up really quickly and succinctly? And then a question to ask is, how well is that short sentence or short statement supporting my thesis? Then read through and look for consistency. A lot of times we have some variability with punctuation. We can do those kinds of things sort of if we want to use an Oxford comma, or we like to structure our sentences in a certain way. There are right ways to do these. It's important to recognize what you're doing and do it consistently. So I use consistency as a red flag. I will look through different elements of my paper and say, do they match every single time? And if I'm finding they don't match, that's a red flag to go learn about what's missing or why it's not consistent. So that could be punctuation, a particular punctuation mark. It could be sentence structure. It could be length of my paragraphs. It could be, Gloria, I forgot the other one that I was thinking of, but there are just so many options. Look at your own work, and of course, feel free to ask me for examples of what you could check as well. How well does a conclusion function? Look at items like that and say, in my introduction, do I feel like I'm reeling people in and saying, this is exciting, this is what you need to read? Is my conclusion restating my thesis and giving clear points? These are small steps. You don't have to be perfect at any of them, but they're good questions to start asking and to start looking for so that you have your own criteria for evaluating each written assignment. So then we look at the revisions. How do you respond to those? Look for a limited number of items to work on. You can't make an impact if you tackle absolutely everything. So what I try to do is not to mark every imaginable thing on your paper. I try to look for a couple of different items and support you in those. So generally, I'm looking at high order concerns, 1 to 2 of those, and low order concerns, 1 to 2 of those. High order concerns are things like a main idea, a thesis, solid organization, content development. Do you have quotes? Do you support your ideas? An introduction and conclusion, of course, and how you are utilizing resources. That could be, are they good resources? Are they solid? It could be how you are using quotations and in-text citation. All of that could fit under that heading. Obviously, I'm not tackling all of these at once for anyone. I'm going to pick the 2 key ones that are happening with you, and I'm going to walk you through those. Low order concerns are things like grammar and mechanics. So a lot of times these are the concepts people are most worried about, but they fall under lower order concerns because you're getting your ideas across, and that is the most important, most difficult thing. These, it's just about memorizing some rules and practicing it. So grammar, mechanics, sentence structure, transitions, word choice, and of course citations. That could be part of the resources, but usually it's about this element of just, where are our periods and our parentheses and items like that. So as I look at your work, I'm going to pick some of these, obviously, but you too could start to pick them and see what you have questions about. So maybe you're worried about your thesis, and you can flag that for me. You can say, hey, the thesis is what I am most concerned about. Could you please focus your feedback on that? If it doesn't need work, I will reassure you and pick something else. So one person could pick, maybe they want help with main ideas and commas. They want help with a thesis and transitions. They want help with organization and verb tense. We're looking at different ideas for each one, because if we try to do absolutely every concept at once, we're just going to wear ourselves out. So when you feel confident about a topic you've picked, then you can move on to another one. So for instance, I worked on commas for years. There are so many different types of commas, and different formatting styles use them differently, and that made me really curious. So I worked on those. Then I started working on my semicolons, and then I started working on split infinitives, which is a type of verb. So all kinds of things move and change and alter. Don't ever feel like you have to know all of that. They're just little bits, and as you work that into your system, as you start to understand it and work on it, your writing is going to grow, and that's just going to keep happening as you approach each new thing. You're always welcome to, continue growing in all the areas as you process each idea. So what on earth does this look like in a paper? These are all nice ideas to think about. Well, we're going to revise our work. That is essentially creating a second draft. And rather than just sitting there looking at our own work thinking, oh, what should I fix? Instead, you have feedback saying, fix this or fix that. And of course, there are going to be comments that you can look at. What surprised you? What confused you? What do you want to work on as a team? You can submit these. You can review my comments. Part of what's happening here is that when I see something, I'm going to say, hey, this is what's happening. So for instance, I may say, look, this is a list of 3 items. And when we list things, we should have parallel structure. And then we'll go off into that world. I'll have links for you to go explore examples. I'll give you suggestions on how to change it. Generally, if we have a problem with parallel structure, 2 items match and 1 doesn't. And so I will give you an example where the 2 items, we just add the third to that, or where I change 2 of the items to match the third one. It's always about not just saying that's how I'd fix it, but this is what's happening, and these are 2 or 3 ways for you to tackle it. What looks good to you? What sounds right to you? And that's going to happen as well when we're looking at like run-on sentences and run-on sentences and sort of squashed sentences. And again, I'm going to give you examples. I'm going to give you the language for what exactly is happening, and I'm going to support you in finding that. So when you submit it, you clean it up. You do that particular task. I also tend to show you 1 or 2 of something and ask you to go look for more, because I want you to start looking for those particular items and recognizing them. This isn't foolproof. It doesn't mean that you're somehow going to get a grade based on the fact that you missed one. It's just that I want you to start seeing these things and asking these questions for yourself, and I'm there to hold your hand through it rather than sort of throwing you into the lion's den. So some things to do. Ask questions about how an instructor marks items. For example, I tend to use an ellipses to denote where I am in your sentence. So I will sort of end a sentence by continuing them saying, your sentence keeps going, but I want to focus on, the punctuation right here, or exactly what we're doing with that particular part. So I will often underline things or mark them, and then I will leave comments as well. And those things like an ellipses is just to show you, like, rather than you trying to wade through 50 words, I can focus in on the punctuation around 10 words or 5 words. Look for indicators. Look for a note about an item. So like here, there's a note about not only, but also. They are a pair when they are put into a sentence. Not only X happens, but also Y happens. So I'm going to underline and mark things like that. And I'm going to give you links in the feedback bubble so that you can go to the Purdue OWL, or if I miss it, which could happen, then you go ahead and ask me for one. Your new draft should be clean. So if we were doing this by hand, that's what it would look like. We would be adding in marks. These are great things for you to practice as well. Editing has specific sort of formatting. So these little arrows kind of going up mean insert a word there, or they show moving an element in. So we would insert after water from the cistern. There are different sort of examples for all of them, and then you can check out your pocket key for writers. It should be in there, or just do a search for editing, proofreading symbols. Or it could be like this, where we see things crossed out, where we see things added. As I did in the other paper, I'm showing things marked out or underlined, and then I'm adding a comment saying, this is what it would look like, and this is why. But then when we turn in our final work, as you can see, this one says The Monkey's Paw in italics, but it's a short story, so we would need quotation marks. We have written by W.W. Jacobs and then published for the first time in 1902. But after we did our editing, The Monkey's Paw is in quotation marks, and we say written by Jacobs 1902 in parens, so that we can keep going with the great details of that sentence. Also because there is a quote without a page number, and that's how we're setting up our citation as well. You'll notice I also took out the initials here, because when we're referring to authors, we aren't using anything but their last names in general. So as you can see, things are different. It would, like these other examples, have marks of some kind on it, but then once we review those and we edit them, it all gets sort of tidied up. So ask questions. I'm giving you different areas to do that. You can submit it under the submitted feedback section. You can ask questions about any of these things and email them to me. You can also use the bottom of your paper to write notes. There are lots of potential places for that, both as a response in terms of writing your revision assignment, but you are also welcome to do that in terms of sending an email. Remember, this is about dialogue. I'm going to make suggestions, and some of my ways of handling it may be something you don't like, or maybe you had a reason for why you wanted to do something, and you're like, well, I really don't want to change that because I did it because of. That's what you need to talk to me about, and then I can say, oh, this is how I perceived it. I can see where you're going with that. There's a totally different way to alter that now because we want your point to come across. I'm not going to be perfect at knowing what's going on in your head. Surprise. So I may need a conversation to make sure that I am supporting you in the best way possible. Ask yourself why you want to or don't want to make a change. You may have great reasons for not changing something. That's the whole point that I'm pushing you toward. I'm also pushing you to not just recognize what you do well, but to ask yourself what is influencing your decisions and your thinking process. So sometimes I may be pushing you just because I want you to explain your choice, and that will show you that you have a reason and you have a point for it. And hopefully that will also increase your confidence and knowledge. So it's a learning process. Each one of you will need a different set of information from me. There isn't one single response or approach. And so each one of you, I'm going to be doing my best, but across 10 people, I may get some of it right and I may get some of it wrong. And I want you to talk back. I want you to have this conversation with me. Some great resources. Of course, we have our Pocket Key for writers with things like an APA style guide, or going on to Purdue OWL for that is great as well. Bedford Handbook is good. Strunk and White's Elements of Style is a great book. The Purdue OWL is one that you will often see me giving you links to. It is the online writing lab OWL of Purdue University. Loads of universities have these, but Purdue just does the absolute best job. So they invest a lot in that, and it's really amazing. But it's not just about ABA or MLA. They will give you information about writing letters, about resumes. It's a really wonderful all-around support, which is another reason why I send you there. Citation machines can be helpful, so bibme.org, citationmachine.net. A lot of them are free with just pop-up windows and things like that. So see what is helpful there. And of course, pay sites can be really great as well. Perla, Grammarly. There are more out there. Just look at them, explore them, do free trials, and see what really makes sense to you. Because they are all really useful. And of course, make your computer programs work for you. Use the spelling and grammar review in your word processing program. So Word, Pages, all of these also have those wonderful resources. So check them out, see what you want as you go along. But remember, revisions are a conversation because we are finding your best possible voice, and we are making sure that you feel confident sharing that voice and using strong, powerful language to do so.